When I order coffee, I look at it like I'm ordering a hot beverage just to help me get through the morning. Now, instead, I typically find myself answering questions that kind of feel more like I'm building a character in a video game. Like what size, what type of milk, flavored creamer, what an extra shot. And sometimes I feel like I'm designing my own drink from scratch. And I do wonder why ordering coffee requires so much input from me. Because I'm a fairly straightforward bloke. Flat white, maybe a latte, and I'm pretty happy. Nescafe instant coffee at home before I head out the door, honestly, is enough for me. But I've watched this play out for years, and eventually one thing became pretty clear. There's much more to it than coffee. Ordering in restaurants, grocery stores, people's homes, even pickup trucks. After calling this country home for the last 8 years, I don't think it's really about customization anymore. I think it's about something much bigger.
You better take cover.
So coffee is where many visitors notice it first, but it doesn't stop there. You can customize your burger, your sandwich, your truck, your phone plan, even your college degree. And sometimes it feels like the standard version is just the starting point, not the finished product. Now, I have to admit, when I first arrived, I found it pretty overwhelming. I remember standing in restaurants trying to answer questions that I hadn't even considered before. Now, years later, I still find myself noticing it. We were in Daytona Beach recently and spent a lot of time eating in restaurants, which meant that my wife, Nikki, had plenty of opportunities to customize things. One night, I sat there watching her remove this, add that, change something else. And I was thinking, why can't you just order what's on the menu? And I was ready to crawl under the table. And then my 10-year-old daughter, well, she started doing it too. And at that point, I wanted to just completely disappear. But what struck me was that nobody seemed surprised. The waitress wasn't annoyed. The kitchen didn't seem bothered. It was treated as a perfectly normal part of ordering dinner. And that's when it dawned on me that the menu wasn't really a set of instructions. It was more like a starting point. I think the longer that I've lived here, the more I've realized that that idea shows up everywhere because the standard version often feels like the beginning, not the finished product. In many countries, if you order a burger, you'll generally get the burger. But in America, ordering a burger often feels more like being handed a menu of possibilities. Want onions? Want bacon? Different cheese? Different bun? And before long, the burger feels almost secondary because the real product is choice. One viewer summed it up perfectly the other day. They said Americans don't seem particularly interested in standard settings. And the more I thought about that, the more accurate I think it feels. In many countries, you assume the default option exists because somebody already made the decision. But in America, the default option often feels more like a suggestion. You can accept it if you want. You can change it or improve it, or you can completely rebuild it from scratch. And once you start looking for it, that mindset shows up everywhere. Now, walk into a truck dealership and you'll find options for almost everything. Walk into a home improvement store. You'll find entire aisles that are dedicated to helping people put their own stamp on things. Even when Americans talk about their homes, they're often talking about what they're planning to do next. A new deck, renovate the kitchen, different flooring, backyard projects. The house is never really finished. It's just the current version. For decades, Americans have been hearing the slogan, "Have it your way." Most people recognize it as a Burger King advertising slogan. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if that slogan reflects something deeper. Because "have it your way" isn't really about hamburgers. It's about the idea that if you're the customer, why shouldn't you get what you want? Why settle for somebody else's idea of the perfect burger when you can build your own? And if you grow up somewhere else, it does stand out. Australia has choices too, of course, But America seems to have embraced that idea to a much greater extent. And this is not because Americans are difficult or demanding. I think it's because many Americans seem comfortable with the idea that things can be changed. They can be improved and upgraded or made more personalized. I was chatting about this with a mate the other day who said that Americans want options. So businesses compete to provide them. That simple observation probably helped me to understand a lot. If customers want choices, somebody will build a business around giving them choices. Then another business will offer even more. And then another competitor will offer more again. And eventually, you end up as the consumer standing in a supermarket aisle trying to choose between 20 different versions of what appears to be exactly the same product. The system rewards companies that can give people what they want. And if people want personalized experiences, customized products, and endless options, that's exactly what businesses will provide. In that sense, customization isn't just a consumer habit, it's a market response. Americans wanted options, businesses listened. In a recent video, I joked that Americans won't just buy a coffee. They'll buy a coffee stirred by a handcrafted Brazilian timber spoon, blessed by monks and stored in an argon filled chamber for maximum spoon freshness. It was obviously ridiculous. But the more that I thought about it, the more I wondered if the joke contained just a tiny bit of truth. As Americans often seem less interested in simply owning something and more interested in finding the version that fits them best, the version that matches their tastes, their needs, their personality. And whether it's a coffee, a truck, a barbecue smoker, or a phone plan, the question often isn't, do I want one? It's which one is right for me. There does seem to be a strong connection between customization and personal choice. Underneath it all is the belief that the best solution might be different for every person. And if that's true, then choices become incredibly important. And that's the logic that I hear from many people here. And honestly, it's pretty hard to argue with. Of course, there are moments when all of these choices become exhausting. I still walk into some American supermarkets and stare at shelves in complete disbelief. Like, how many versions of granola bars does humanity actually need? How many breakfast cereals can one country possibly create? And how many flavors of yogurt are necessary before we've officially just gone too far? Sometimes I miss the simplicity of fewer options. There is something comforting, I guess, about walking into a shop, grabbing the thing you came for, and leaving. You don't have to research or compare. You don't have decision fatigue. It's just done. But then again, many people here would probably respond with a very reasonable question. If you don't want all the options, why not simply just choose one and move on? I guess that's a fair point. The breakthrough for me came while reading through thousands of your comments on the channel. One person summed it up perfectly. They said, "Why would I have it your way when I can have it my way?" And suddenly, I think a lot of it started making sense to me. Americans don't necessarily see customization as complexity. They often see it as freedom. They don't always see endless options as a burden. They see them as opportunities. Opportunities to make something fit their needs just that little bit better. So once I started looking at it that way, a lot of American culture, it becomes easier to understand. For a long time, I guess I assumed all of this customization was a bit excessive. The giant coffee menus and endless options, being able to build your own everything approach, it can feel unnecessarily complicated. But now I'm really not so sure. I think Americans customize everything because they genuinely believe life can be improved. And that's whether it's a coffee or a burger or a truck. There's often a sense that the standard version isn't necessarily the final version. There's always another option, another upgrade, another version. And it's part of what makes America such an energetic and optimistic place. Because underneath all of those choices, there's a pretty simple idea. The belief that this standard version doesn't have to be the final version. And after 8 years here, that's one American habit I've come to understand a lot better. If you've enjoyed this, you'll find more stories about life between Australia and the United States over at FromDownUnderToDownSouth.com. I also dive deeper into topics like this every Thursday on the From Down Under to Down South podcast in a series called This Week in America. You'll find links to both in the description or in the show notes as well. Hooroo, mateys.
You better take cover.